We haven't seen a collapse in essentially the consumer response in the sense of what they're buying. But as you know, being dialed into real estate, with 30-year fixed rate mortgages having popped above 5% in recent days, those in the residential real estate business are quite concerned that we may see, even a double-digit decline in sales at some point down the road.
Interesting. Yeah, it is actually. So this was actually my question. So consumer sentiment negative.
Yes.
People are physically migrating, right? It's not just they're quitting jobs and moving physically. So you get this sense of incredible motion, right? Physically in the economy. Do you think, this is the thought, do you think people are moving so fast and trying to change stuff and resettle before the music stops? Is that the sentiment you think that's in the market, or?
I'm sure there are some, but what my colleague Greg McBride, who's been with Bankrate much longer than I have, and is sort of our Tom Brady of Bankrate, if you will, came up with a phrase that I love, and that is, people don't get married just because wedding dresses go on sale, right? Or for sale, in other words, marked down. And so, there are going to be people that just need to live their lives no matter what. And I think about my many younger colleagues and friends who, absolutely moved at some point during the pandemic, whether it was an apartment or picked up from the New York City area and went somewhere else because it felt claustrophobic and dangerous, being in that population center. But the other part is as an economic judgment, right? In other words, let's say someone is happy with the employment they have and they have the opportunity to work remote, and they also seize upon the opportunity to move to the Columbus, Ohio, or Tulsa, Oklahoma kind of community where might be less traffic, sort of less hassle, for lack of a better way of putting it, and a much better entry point for home purchase. So I think that's one of the marvelous things about what's happened, right? I mean, we didn't wish a pandemic upon ourselves by any stretch of the imagination, but we've learned to use tools like we are right now that we didn't know we had available. Certainly, if it had been 9/11, we had to do this, we couldn't have done what we've done. And there is this awareness, by the way, on the part of agile and I would say aware employers and enterprises, that if they can, they have to acknowledge that there's no going back to the way things were before. And much the same as those who survived through the Great Depression will have had their lives permanently changed by this experience. I'm speaking about the pandemic. So, there was massive distrust of banks because banks were failing all over the place, and that brought a lot of reform, including the protection of savers' bank balances, as well as other changes under FDR, et cetera. And I don't think we'll have the regulatory changes in the environment, but essentially, these changes are structural that are occurring, right? Because people are recognizing, well, if you don't allow me to work from home, I'll find somebody who does. And I just had this experience in the last week where I went to my doctor's office for a regular checkup. I won't say who the doctor is because I don't want to call out the staffer, who was a very professional young woman and all that. And I'm, a sort of a curious person by nature. And I said, how do you like what you're doing? And how long have you been doing it? And she was probably in her 20s. And she said, I love my work, but I want to work from remote from now on. She was a technician in the doctor's office. And I thought, there you go. And so those people who have to work in public or in public facing jobs, I think have a sense that there's a trade-off from that unless they just absolutely love it. And if they have to make that trade-off, then they're going to say, okay, I know I can't bring dishes to the table from the kitchen in this restaurant from my home, but I would like you to pay me or give me more flexible hours. And so I think with all that we've been pained by the pandemic, whether it's the loss of life or sacrifice or all those things, or just a sense of, lives are at risk, stress, we've been able to have a remarkable amount of innovation. And those innovations are going to foster and have fostered great productivity improvements, learning, higher awareness of the need to be attentive to mental health, And enterprises have to be attentive to those things. Employers have to be attentive to those things. So these are all changes which could have never occurred had it not been for this.
Well, it's interesting to say never occurred. My sense of it is that it's just accelerated existing trends, basically. I mean, it would have happened, but it would have taken longer. This has just kind of whipped it up and forced people to work remotely. And suddenly you realize, well, what the heck? Why am I commuting anymore?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I mean, some of the more conservative employers out in the world, obviously it's not a political statement, I'm talking about their way of approaching the work, have now recognized that, you've got to sort of relax and trust people to the degree that you can do that. And you can measure their performance, and that's appropriate and more appropriate in some settings than others. But, we don't have a highly unionized workforce in this country, and it may be true that ship has sailed. But there's other ways that workers can take control or seize upon opportunity and power, and they're doing that. And obviously we see the sort of one-offs with Starbucks or the attempts to unionize at Amazon, apparently so far unsuccessfully. But workers have other ways of trying to drive, the process.